I don't know about where you live, but where I'm at, it's hot, and I've got 7 tips for you on what to do on a hot, dry weather to help your lawn. Where I live in Alabama, it seems like August and September is when the weather gets super hot. Now, it's super hot in July, but it also turns off really dry a lot of times, and that seems to be the pattern we're going into this year. We have plenty of rain early in the year. As you get approaching August, it starts getting dried up, and a yard that was just lush and green can turn brown very, very quickly. So let's get started. 7 tips to help you what to do when it's super hot and dry, and how to help your lawn look the best in those conditions. Now, this is what my lawn looks like right now, and it's not perfect by any means. There's a couple of imperfections on this lawn for sure, but it is much greener than a lot of the lawns I've been seeing. Let me say this, I have no irrigation on this lawn. I have several acres, and I don't water it hardly at all. So what am I doing different? So tip number 1 is, I'm gonna tell you to mow your grass a little bit taller. Now, I'm primarily dealing with Bermuda and zoysia grasses, and it's a little bit of centipede, St. Augustine, but particularly on these Bermuda and zoysia lawns, I think it's probably helpful, unless you're gonna really water it a lot, to mow it a little taller. Now, why is that? Well, one thing, as you get, particularly with Bermuda, as you get closer to fall, I feel like the grass can get a little bit leggy, if you will, meaning that just the tip of the grass is actually green and most of it is kind of a brown stalk. So if you continue to cut it short, unless again you're going to mow it very frequently and put the water to it, then obviously it look much better. But if you're going to just mow it every week or every other week, it can start to get a little bit leggy. And so by mowing it taller, I think you're accomplishing a couple things. One, you're not scalping off the little bit of green that was left on that lawn. Now, sometimes, just a tip, this is a bonus tip, I guess you'd say. On the last cut of the year, I'll cut it short on purpose just because I'm tired of mowing it and I just want to send it into dormancy a little bit earlier. But what else are you doing? I think by doing that, you're also insulating the roots a little bit, or you're shading them out. I don't know if insulating is the right word or not, but you're providing a little bit of shade for the roots so it's not drying out quite as quickly. So I just think as the lawn is a little bit longer, it seems like it doesn't require as much water and not going to dry out quite as quickly than if you're mowing it really, really short. Now I want to show you a picture to illustrate my next point. Let me go ahead and flash that now. Now, what you just saw is 2 yards side by side. I actually take care of both these yards from a weed control and fertilization standpoint. And both of these yards looked great for most of the year until recently. So the first tip was mow it higher. The second one is mow it a little bit later in the day. Now, what happened to that lawn? Well, obviously something had to do with the lawnmower, okay? It's nothing I sprayed, because I spray those yards right at the exact same time with the exact same products. And the customer understood that. But what happened is a lot of times the customer will go out of town, they'll come back, it's super hot and humid, it's been raining a lot, grass is growing like crazy. I know I said it's raining a lot and we're talking about a dry lawn, but if it's raining a lot and there's all this humidity trapped up in there, and then you mow the grass, it does that to the lawn. And you can tell it's not an insect or a fungus, because look at how linear the damage was on that lawn. I mean, if it was an insect, you think it knows where the property line is and it's not going to jump over to the neighbor's house? In this situation, the tip is not don't go out of town. Obviously you can do that, but what I would recommend in this situation, you go out of town, the grass has gotten taller, it's been a couple weeks, then I would wait later in the day to mow the grass. Wait till it's dried out, not when all that humidity is trapped up in there. And then of course mow it tall. You know, you say, well, it's been 2 weeks, I've been out of town. Mow it and just take a little off the top the first time, and then if you want to mow it 3 days later and get a little bit shorter, you could do that as well. But don't try to take it all the way back down to the normal mowing height in one time, and then again mowing it later in the day where it's dried out a little bit and there's not quite as much humidity trapped under the canopy of that lawn. The third thing I would say is go easy on the herbicide when you're talking about hot, dry weather. The lawn can already be stressed out in that time, and hopefully your weeds are under control because you've put out timely pre-emergent applications. You've been tackling the weeds with your post-emergent. So hopefully you're not out there thinking, I've got to just weeds everywhere, I've got to drop all of my best products on this lawn right now when it's 97 degrees. If the lawn is already stressed, let's don't do something else to stress it out even more. Now thankfully there are some products that are easier on the turf when the weather is warm. For our warm season lawns, a product like Celsius, it can be used even in the hot temperatures. I've been spraying a product called Surge lately that has 90 degrees as a temperature restriction on that. And one thing you remember on that is, I was reminded this recently, that that's the temperature when it is applied. So you could go out there early in the morning or late in the evening when it's not so hot and not having to do it right in the middle of the day at the hottest point of the day. Of course, if you're worried about it, you could just test a small area before you go out there and spray a lot of your lawn with a particular product. The fourth thing I want to mention, of course, has to do with water, and you want to water your lawn. Let me show you something in my lawn to illustrate. All right, look at this yard. Look, as you go over here, it's much greener. Apologize for all the shadows, but if you go over here, what happens? So it starts turning brown. Well, obviously what's going on here is we've got really hard compacted soil that basically is a gravel pit. So I mean, there's another tip in here that, hey, don't grow your grass on a gravel pit, but that's not the tip I'm wanting to share with you. The point I was wanting to make is I've got an indicator area like this. So when this starts turning brown, I can imagine that the rest of my lawn's probably not far behind. So when it comes to water, and I encourage people often, even when they're not in a drought stress, one watering tip, and this is again not the one I had in mind, is don't wait until your lawn is on life support before you start watering, okay? Go ahead and start watering when you see, hey, it's been a week or two and it's really, really hot. Trust me, your lawn can dry out very quickly, especially if it's out there in full sun. I would encourage you to water deeply and less frequently, so don't go out there and water for 10 minutes every day. Give it a good 30, 40 minutes soaking early in the morning. You can water in the evenings occasionally, but if you do that consistently, you're probably going to cause some fungus on the lawn, stuff like dollar spot. And watering more frequently, weeds love that, particularly weeds like doveweed, and a lot of your sedges love a wet lawn. Water 1 or 2 times a week depending on the need, and really give it a good soaking early in the morning where it can drink it up before the hot sun comes up to evaporate what you just watered. Before we get to the next tip, I know some of you heard about it and some of you are participating in the 12-month mentoring program that we started up this year. It's going great. If you're interested in getting into weed control and fertilization like me, and you live in an area that has warm season lawns, then go down to the description below and click on the first link in the description, and that'll allow you to book a 15-minute call with me, and we'll see if it's a fit. If you're somebody that wants to get in weed control and fertilization and needs to know what to do, I can help you. Book that call and let's talk about it. The fifth tip is one you may not have thought of, and that is using a growth regulator on your lawn. Products out there like Primo Max or T-Nex or Podium, growth regulators for the lawn. What it does, in my understanding, is it takes a lot of the energy it was normally using to grow the leaves, and it's taking that and growing deeper roots and making actually healthier turf. So if you had done that earlier in the year, you're probably going to have grass that's actually more drought tolerant because it's got those deeper roots. Again, we don't have to look any further than my gravel pit lawn right here to see this is probably really shallow rooted grass. It's going to be the first to suffer when the weather gets hot and dry. Another thing I want to mention to you is when the weather is hot and dry, as you approach fall, is don't be in a rush to get your pre-emergent out there. You know, we talk a lot about putting out a fall pre-emergent. I'm probably going to be spraying a lot of Spectacle this year as we get into September and approaching into October. But if it's 95 degrees on September the 10th, I'm not in a big hurry to get out there for a couple of reasons. One, we talked about that if the lawn's already stressed out from drought and things, then what's the rush? Why would I go out there and spray that? Now, the Spectacle I don't think is going to do much to damage the lawn, but if you're mixing in there a post-emergent, something like Metsulfuron or 2,4-D or something to help with the broadleaf weeds, then that can cause further damage to the lawn as it goes in the winter. A couple more thoughts on this. One, the reason I'm putting the application out in the first place is to get ahead of my cool season weeds. Well, if it's still in the 90s, I don't think many cool season weeds are thinking about germinating yet, so you've got a little bit of time before you have to rush out there and make that application. And the third reason, at least I believe this is how it works, is the heat can break down that pre-emergent quicker. So if you put it out there and it's still hot, it's breaking down, which means it's probably not going to last as long and not going to do as good a job of controlling the weeds you were hoping it was going to control later on as you approach winter and even the fall and spring. The seventh thing I want to mention is if it's super hot and dry, why don't you just hold off on planting any new shrubs or trees or sod? Can you plant sod? I had this question asked to me the other day. Can you plant sod in August? Well, of course you can plant it, but you're gonna have to really water it. And if you get enough rain, it can really root itself very quickly during those hot times. But also, it can also go bad for you, because if you plant it and you don't get much rain, it's really hard to give it enough water to take root. So if you're gonna plant a sod, I wouldn't just throw it down on hard compacted soil. I'd make sure I got some topsoil, hopefully get some topsoil and plenty of water to give it a chance to root itself quickly in that hot weather, because you're gonna have to really water it if it's just laying out there on top of the ground with very little rooting and the weather's so hot. I would personally probably wait until, if we're doing warm season grasses, I would prefer to wait till September, October. Hopefully by then you still got time for it to root before you get into the really cold weather, which can be damaging the lawn. But you wouldn't have to water it near as much, because the weather would be cooler and the days would be a little bit shorter. Again, I don't think you want to wait too late, because you don't want to put the grass out there and then have it just go down to a single-digit temperatures, which can really cause some damage to an immature lawn, but especially one that has virtually no roots and just laying on top of the ground. Well, I hope this is helpful for you. This is all part of just a total plan for how to care for a lawn. These weathering patterns seem to repeat themselves year after year. Hot, dry weather. We could have talked about armyworms coming in on the lawn, which sometimes happens this time of year as well. So there's a lot of other things we could have mentioned, but I appreciate you watching. If you want to book that 15-minute call, go below and do that with the first link in the description, and we'll see you guys in the next video.